you for everybody who is here. I can truly say it's the grace of God that has brought me here. And I'm not saying that flippantly, I'm saying it truthfully. So I'd just like to start off by saying there's lots of thank yous tonight. And the first thank you goes to the committee that selected me from the other options that they had. I want to say this, that I have enjoyed preparing for this lecture. It has taken a lot of work, but I've immersed myself into Dr. Karpovich, and I'm going to share that with you in a few minutes. I learned something about this, and I think this is really important. Notice this, that this series was first suggested, this from what I've read, by a Peter S. Burnett. He was a student trustee. Apparently at that time there was some debate as to whether or not they should have a student as a member of the trustee board. And eventually they agreed on it. And this lecture series was his idea. That's what I read in a resource. I thought that was very interesting. At his death, at Dr. Karpovich's death, his second wife, Dr. Rathborn, indicated that any contributions that were made should be made in honor to him, rather, of this particular lecture. And what spoke to my heart, I'm going to say this quite honestly, I'm truly honored to be giving this lecture, because this meant a lot to Dr. Karpovich. He knew about it, and it actually meant something to him, also before he passed away. A special thank you, I did not know this gentleman before this experience. I really didn't know he existed, really. But I spent a lot of time talking to Jeff and in the archives, and I've really come away with a genuine appreciation of the rich history that we have at Springfield College. And I think that's one of the things I want to leave with you tonight, that we have a fantastic history here that puts some responsibility on those of us who are right here now to carry on. So, in terms of this presentation, I just want to sort of lay the foundation for it. We're going to talk a bit about Dr. Karpovich, because I feel as if this is the Karpovich lecture, and you should know something about Dr. Karpovich. That's number one. Then after that, I'm going to get into some of the work that groups of us have done here before, over a period of time. And then finally, I do want to talk about the work that we are currently doing, which I think is interesting. And then finally, I can't see this, but our future plan. And if it's God's will, that's all I can tell you. So I just want to start off by doing this. And I feel as if for those who have been, there's some people in this room who had Dr. Karpovich as a professor. Okay? That is the reality. And I kept this a bit of a surprise so that I want you to hear from Dr. Karpovich himself. Not from me, but from him himself.
My short biography. I was born on April 6, 1896 in Luga, Russia, about 80 miles from St. Petersburg, or Leningrad. I had 5 brothers and 3 sisters. I was a combination of a bookworm and physically very active. I became interested in physical education while in high school, and was stimulated by my older brother, 10 years older than I, who was an engineer by vocation and a physical educator by avocation. He had taken one course for teachers, and his conclusion had been that although physical education makes people healthier, nobody seems to know why and how. We had many discussions on this subject. It was then that my brother said, "There are many skilled people who can teach physical activities, but very few who are trying to make scientific investigations concerning the physiological foundation of physical education." It was then that I decided to go into research. And to be prepared for this, I decided to go to medical school. While I was at my medical school, I assisted in the YMCA with classes in Swedish gymnastics and physical examination. There I met an assistant professor of forensic medicine from our school, Dr. Petrov, who was an Olympic wrestler and greatly interested in sports and physical education. He lectured in the Y on physical education, and through him I became acquainted with the classic physical education literature in German and French. It may be of interest to you that one of the books I read at that time, Mécanisme et éducation de mouvement by G. Demeny, I still use in my laboratory when engaged in kinesiological research. I entered medical school in 1914. It was then called the Imperial Military Medical Academy of St. Petersburg. There were on the faculty some outstanding men, the great physiologist and Nobel Prize winner Ivan P. Pavlov, the internationally known histologist Alexander Maximov, and the orthopedic surgeon Turner, to name a few. At my insistence, a course in physiology of exercise was organized, which was attended voluntarily without any credit. Although I was greatly interested in most medical subjects, I paid special attention to subjects which would be especially useful for my research: physiology, pharmacology, hygiene, and orthopedics. With the assistance of some friends, we organized classes in fencing and wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling. Then came the 1917 revolution. It gave a great impetus to physical culture, as physical education is called in Russia. In 1918, I was invited to lecture on scientific bases of physical education to instructor of gymnastics. While in medical school, I was a member of the YMCA, and by the time I graduated from medical school, I had become acquainted and even proficient in some sports: wrestling, soccer, track and field, ice skating, and skiing, and obtained a certificate as an instructor of Swedish gymnastics. When I graduated from medical school in 1919, officially I was to remain there as a research fellow, but because of a great epidemic of typhus fever, I was sent 1,000 miles from Leningrad to fight this disease. After a year, I was transferred to be a physician and lecturer at the military school of physical education, and eventually went back to my medical school to take refresher courses. In 1923, I decided to go to the United States to get experience in research in physical education. I was told that the leading man in that field was Dr. James H. McCurdy at Springfield College. I crossed illegally to Latvia and waited there for an opportunity to go to Springfield. With the aid of the YMCA, I came to Springfield in 1925. A year later, I found that if I returned to Russia, the Bolsheviks would put me in jail. This did not sound very inviting because I had already been in one of their jails on some fictitious charges, and when released after a few weeks could hardly walk from starvation. I started teaching physiology at Springfield in 1927, where I have remained all the time except during World War II, when I became the chief of the physical fitness laboratory for the Army Air Force. In 1961, I retired from teaching, but continued to do research on government grants. I expect to retire again in 1968, when I'll be approximately 72. So far, I have published 148 articles and have written alone or in collaboration 8 books. I have been happily married to Dr. Josephine L. Rathbone, a former professor at Teachers College, Columbia University, whose book, Corrective Physical Education, you probably use in your studies. I have no particular plans for the future. I will enjoy watching my grandchildren grow. We will do some painting, photography, lecture occasionally, and keep in touch with research at Springfield and other places. My physical activity has been limited since 1961. I tried to lift my car from the mud and injured my back.
I'm really glad that we have enjoyed his comments. So I can get back to the presentation. So, you heard it from himself, his own words. And during the summer, when I was doing this, my wife and daughter could probably tell you, I have a spot in my basement. And I was going through this material, and I would hear this, and other things I'm going to share with you. And I would just laugh. I would laugh out loud at some of the things that I heard and I read about Dr. Karpovich. Okay? So just a few quick things I'm going to go over. Obviously, he was born in Russia. You just heard that. And I'm sort of going over this again just to see, to make it clear the adversity that he had to overcome. He was the sixth of 9 children. His mother died at an early stage. So that was a tough situation. His brother, he had a lot of influence from his older brother that you heard. He studied again at this state military institute. And I want you to see this. He studied under Dr. Pavlov. You heard him say that. When I read this, I said, what's he talking about? This is crazy. But that was his reality. He worked under Dr. Pavlov. So he came to the United States via Latvia. The story there is that he actually faked a divorce from his first wife. And she and the son, he had one son named George, went over to Latvia. He eventually went there. And there's a story you can read about him going across a swamp, tying up a Russian soldier. Basically, he left Russia under those types of circumstances. And he comes there. He comes to the YMCA, and I think it's in Cleveland. I could be wrong on that, but he comes to the YMCA. And one of the things that really caught my attention was the fact of this. He said it just now a few minutes ago. Whilst in Russia, he had heard about Springfield College. He had heard about the work of this Dr. McCurdy. Without Dr. McCurdy, there would be no Dr. Karpovich. He heard about this man's work, and that drew him to Springfield College. I mean, it really spoke to me. So here he is. He came to Springfield College around 1925. He came as I have this summary, a special student. He was a physician, an MD. And notice this, he went to medical school so that he could basically use that information for his research. It didn't seem as if he was really going there because I really want to be a physician, but he was using it for his research. So in 1927, apparently from what I've read, he was hired to teach physiology to cover for Dr. Elmer Barry, who went off someplace else, I think, to something good. It wasn't anything bad. Okay? So he was like what we would call today like almost like a GA or some replacement of that type. But this is it. He graduated with a master's degree in physical education in 1929. This is a picture here. I'm not sure if you can see it very well, but Dr. Karpovich and his first wife, Alice, and their son, George. Again, this happened here. So he got a degree from Springfield College. See, there are people here who lived this, or knew these people. Anyway, I found this interesting. There's some discrepancies, by the way, and some things. He was a faculty member from 1929 to 1969. Full-time, let's call it full-time faculty, okay? At one point, he did, I'm gonna go over this again, he did go to Texas during the Second World War, as he said it himself. He retired from teaching in 1961, but continued on as a director of physiology. I read until 1969. He said 1968, but maybe they forced him into getting another year. But anyway, so he was here, the director of physiology research here. He published more than 150 scholarly articles. I think there was part of the marketing said that more than 130. It says I think it's 150. Back in those days, we had typewriters, I assume. There's a lot of, I mean, we can't cut and paste very easily. Magnificent work that he did. He was one of the founders of the ACSM. For those who are not familiar, the American College of Sports Medicine is the biggest organization type in the whole world. Okay? He died in 1975. There's something else I wanted to mention about it, was that, I think I might have jumped over it somewhere. In 1924, there was a change in immigration law in this country. Dr. Karpovich was here at the college, after that time. And there came a point where they needed to change his immigration status. He could not go back to Russia. Right? Part of the law was you had to go back to your own country. He couldn't do that. there was a debate to whether he should go to Canada or Mexico. I do not know the details, but he became a full-fledged citizen in 1935, from what I read. Anyway, his research is just amazing. I'm just going to flip through some of this for time's sake. He did research on all these different things here at Springfield College. I want to make this point very clear to particularly the students. This was done at Springfield College, right? This same Springfield College. I mean, the buildings were different, but it was done right here at the college. All this stuff he did. During the wartime, he worked on soldier fitness, first aid, and rehabilitation of injured soldiers. One of the first to do it. After the war, he did some work with the sanitation workers in New York. This was one of his low points. And the stories, you can look it up and see the rest of the stories, but he made an error. There was an issue with some wheat germ that was being evaluated, and I think he would have got the wrong stuff. And basically, people were then questioning his credentials because he had done medicine in Russia and so on. It was a low point for what I read about it. This gentleman, between 1950 to 1969, brought in over almost $500,000, more than $500,000. In today's money, that's a few $1 million. Okay? But this was done, again, here at Springfield College. I want you to emphasize that. So I am just showing you some pictures. I think one of the students is in the room back there, and we were talking about doing a study, a field-based study, collecting some data, and I said, Karpovich is doing this back, in the 1950s. Here he is trying to measure energy expenditure in different activities outside of the lab with a Douglas bag and so on. We have the equipment today, the technology today to do this a lot more easier. But he was doing it back then. Swimming, don't ask me exactly what he was doing. But one of these devices, I think one of these devices was measuring the resistance to water in swimming. This gentleman was ahead of his time. Here he's looking at blood pressure. Look how they dressed in those days. Look at this. I mean, so he's measuring blood pressure. He also did some footwork. Let me make the point here. This is about physiology, yes, but Dr. Karpovich did more than mere physiology. I just want to make that point clear. It was like biomechanics, he did a bit of other things as well, and so on. Here he is in the lab. Some of the equipment he finagled himself, or fixed up himself. No, I can't do that, quite frankly. I mean, not many of us can actually do that, but he had that skill to actually do that himself. He and his son created the electrogoniometer. He and his son did that here at Springfield College. Okay? So, I didn't read this anywhere. I put this together in my head. Okay? Dr. Karpovich had a background in the YMCA. He had a background in physical education. Right? Physical education was really a part of his life. He obviously had science in terms of the science of the time, medicine. He put that all together, in my view. He put that all together to create basically exercise physiology here at Springfield College. And I think, and I'm just reflecting on this, all these different fields, exercise science, the basis of exercise science is what Karpovich did. He laid the foundation for it when he was here. The basis of strength and conditioning, and you can't say it very well, sports science, was laid by Karpovich. I was trying to get athletic training. I wasn't as clear cut there. He did some rehab work, but I would argue, I was thinking about this today as well. Physical therapy, athletic training, all take courses in exercise physiology. The bottom line, you can make a case for the fact that Dr. Karpovich has laid the foundation of all these fields, or at least made a contribution to the development of all these disciplines. Okay? So I think that it's just an amazing thing. The other thing that I want to leave with you is this, as I transition into the other phase of the talk. He did, it's Dr. Karpovich, but it wasn't just Dr. Karpovich alone. He had a team of people, including Dr. McCurdy, from what I've read. He obviously learned from Dr. McCurdy some things. I haven't read a lot more about him, but other individuals, and I wanted to draw us to other people's attention. He wrote a book, he wrote about 8 books from what I can read. Physiology of Muscular Activity and Weight Training in Athletes, Strength and Conditioning. right? So every strength and conditioning student should know about Dr. Karpovich. Every physiology student should know about Dr. Karpovich. And understand that without his contribution, we won't be here today. So at this point, I think I would leave Dr. Karpovich's information. If there is more information about him, this is on our website. We can actually look this up in the archives. There's a ton of information about him. And I actually truly feel, as speaking to Dr. Cologne, that we need somebody to write a book about Dr. Karpovich. Somebody at some point needs to write something about him. It's just fascinating information. I'm just sort of skimming the surface for this. Now, I'm now going to transition for the next few minutes to talk about work that some of us have done here at the college. Again, I want to emphasize what has been done at Springfield College. Okay? So before I get there, I want to say a thank you to many people. And I hope you can see everybody. Okay? I started with my family. Dawn and Priscilla are here, but Stephen and Sarah and their families are not here, but they wanted to be here. Then there's family in Barbados that you folks would never know anything about. I mean, there's a whole family support that I have been blessed with for all my life. That's why that makes a difference. I want to make a special thank you to Dr. Al Cologne. He was like a father to me as a mentor. And then I also want to say thank you to administrators. Some of whom are here. Dr. Constantine was one very early on when I first came to Springfield College. Was very supportive of the work that I was trained to do. And then all the others, I mean, Dr. Geyer, still here, and others, who have all made a contribution to the work that you're going to see unfolded. The grants officers, Linda Marston, she's not here anymore. Without her, some of the grants that we got, we would not have had. And I'm now working with Tony Motel, and we got work that we are doing. And there's more to be done, God willing. Okay? Faculty, colleagues, I just want to, there's a whole list. But I would like to highlight, I'm not saying that others aren't important, but I really, really want everybody to pay attention to this young lady over here, Dr. Beth Evans, okay? Dr. Evans, I will tell you more about her as we go further on. She has made such a contribution to the research that we have done since 2008. I have learned, I want people to learn this. If you're going to do a study, the two most important people are your recruiter and your project manager, if you want to call it that. Those are the two most important people. If you're in a PI and you have a good recruiter and you have a person, a study coordinator, you got it. Without a recruiter, you have no study. So I just want to say thank you to Dr. Evans. She's been doing it volunteer and really pushing me to get things done. It's because of Dr. Evans. Okay? And then all staff members, look, everybody, I mean, it's taken all of these individuals, and I hope I haven't missed anybody, but it's really been a team effort. I just want you to see, I'm going to put up here, research is a team sport, activity. Those of us who have come from a team sport background understand. To win, you have to pick the right players, then you have to equip them to basically do their jobs and get to work as a team. And this is a reality. If you don't do that, you don't win. You can have a lot of individual talent, but if you don't get them to gel together, you've got a problem. That's a reality. So we've had lots over the years, and these pictures are, because of the lighting, maybe a bit difficult. But I want you to see the teams. And this has made me go back. This is 30 years of work. To go back to look at Dr. Keenan, cardiologist, very early on, and other members here. Dr. Coughlin, believe it or not, was my statistician. In those early days, I used to go to Dr. Coughlin with my statistics back then. And then all the others, I mean, some have left the college. This is going to still growing. It's still in it. It's not, everybody is not here yet because we're still developing this. Students, again, it really enjoyed going back and looking at students way back who've gone, who've graduated, who are, got their own lives. And then some who are still here, some who are gone. So I want you to see that it takes a whole team to do things and to do them well, not just an individual thing. I feel as if it's important for me before I delve into this stuff. I know that everybody is not from a physiology background. So when you see some of these terms, PRA stands for plasma reading activity, PEH stands for post-exercise hypotension. That means the drop in blood pressure after exercise. SVR stands for systemic vascular resistance. CKD is chronic kidney disease. It's people with kidney disease. You're going to hear a lot about that. ESRD means end-stage renal disease as the last stage. GFR stands for glomerular filtration rate. It's the amount of fluid that you are filtering in your kidneys every minute. Normal is like 100 mils per minute. And then these are other substances here. This is something that's a toxin that we can talk about. And this is the short chain fatty acids. I know you're not going to remember all of that, but I thought that you should know. So when I came here in 1992, I came with a research agenda. I honestly did. I wanted to do this for my dissertation. That didn't work out. I just wanted to get my degree and move on. But I had an agenda. And the agenda was, I wanted to identify the responder to moderate intensity exercise screening. I mean in terms of blood pressure. Because I actually read this paper back in 1985 that came out. Then it was a current paper. But this group in Japan, they actually found that of their group of hypertensives who went through a program, people who had low plasma reading activity were the ones who responded drastically to the exercise training. You're talking about 20 millimeters systolic, 10 millimeters diastolic. That's a big drop in blood pressure. And basically, it was those who had low plasma reading activity, and I created this hypothesis knowing that in the black population, we have a lot of lower reading hypertension. That's the profile in the black population. So as a result of that, this was a hypothesis that I was addressing when I came to the college. So because I was teaching 4 classes, don't have time to really do some of this stuff, although I was getting support, quite honestly, I decided to look at it in an acute model. And I actually did a study at Gettysburg previously along the same lines. So in an acute model, what we did basically, we took people and put them on a treadmill, asked them to walk for 40 minutes, and then checked the blood pressures for 2 hours. The first study that I attempted to do here in black males failed. It just didn't work out. I just couldn't recruit. I couldn't recruit the males. I couldn't recruit them. I just couldn't get it done. Eventually, however, we did a study with females, black and white females. And at the end of that, we got a publication out of this very early on. And we basically came to the conclusion, which is as this. If you look at this graph, you will see that here is your reading activity at baseline. Here is your change in your resistance. And there were 2 different responses. You would notice that this line represents what was happening in the black population. This is what's happening in the white population. We came to the realization that there was a difference between the 2 ethnic groups. And the big difference was in the vasculature between those 2 groups. And I still think this study, I say that it's been published for many years. I have not sort of gone back to it because of other things I've developed. But that was a finding that I think is really worth going back to. So you can't say it very well, but then between that period in time, this is late 2000, rather late 1990, whatever. I met a gentleman by the name of Dr. Michael Germain. And I met him because one Friday afternoon, I was in the Allied Health Building. I was calling around to find out where can I get a placement for some of my master's students to do their internships, clinical internships. I called Bay State. Eventually, this is Friday afternoon. I called Bay State, and they bumped me over to Rennerda. I spoke to Dr. Germain, and that was the start. And we have been doing research since late 90s to today. Okay? So we began to look at kidney studies rather than just hypertension. Because the reality is, if you got high blood pressure, you may end up with kidney disease. They are connected. Okay? So initially, we were looking at end-stage renal disease. I want to make you aware of this. Again, I'm sorry this is not very clear, but kidney patients are staged in 5 stages. It goes basically from 1 through to 5. You can't see it well down here. But the bottom line is, when your GFR gets to 15, you are put either on dialysis, hemodialysis, peritoneal dialysis, transplant, or you're left to die. Those are the options. Okay, those are really the options. Okay, so you're dealing with a sick group of people, very, very sick group of people. Again, you can't see this very well. So the first study they tried to do was to determine the effect of a resistance training program. And this is around 2000. Remember, I took a sabbatical at that point, and we looked at this particular study. We were looking at strength training and see what impact it would have on muscle function. And we sort of thought that it would do them good, it would do them no harm. The results proved that what we had suggested was correct. We actually found that the strength training actually helped these patients to get better. We couldn't do anything for the kidneys, right? The kidneys are gone, but we can do something for their function. And that's what we did back then. And notice, I want you to see that the team that we had back then was Dr. Margaret Jones was part of it. Britt Brewer, I forgot to put him up. Britt Brewer was part of the team. We had a big team of people who worked on that. These are some of the results. Strength went up. I must point out here that this was the baseline. We did 2 tests, 6 weeks apart, without anything in between. We didn't have a control group. That was a mistake, by the way. That was a mistake, and I must admit that to you right now. But we had a control period. Okay, so we did that, and people got better. They got stronger. They were able to do better on a 6-minute walk test, an aerobic test, without doing aerobic training. That's what we actually came up with at that point. Their gait speed was better, and their functional strength improved. This study had a lot of mileage. This got printed in a bunch of places and cited a whole lot of times. And very early on, this has been the most impactful study that we've done at Springfield College back in the year 2000. So we came to the conclusion that medically stable ESRD patients should be encouraged. And this was off dialysis days. So if you do dialysis on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they'll come to Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday for this training. We felt that doing moderate intensity training was safe, as well as it could lead to substantial improvements in their quality of life. This was important. People didn't really know if you work these patients, if they're going to do better or worse. And I made some mistakes with 1 or 2 patients, which wasn't catastrophic, thankfully. I do want you to hear from a patient, 1 or more patients who went through the study. The background to this, there's a lot more to this. But I met this gentleman again, a Wednesday night, a few months ago, at Stop and Shop in Springfield. I was checking out my groceries, my bananas, and I look over and I says, "Ray, you look good." The main reason for that was that he was a dialysis patient. I had seen him before, and if you see a dialysis patient, you see how debilitated they may look. He was not looking that way anymore. I want this will. You will hear this.
Getting ready to enter my junior year in college in Connecticut on basketball scholarship. And all of a sudden, I started just feeling my stomach hurt. I'm like, why is my stomach hurt? I'm still working. I'm still having, still trying to work overtime the summer and earn money for college. So I ended up going and I got diagnosed with end-stage renal disease. From that, I ended up going on dialysis for a long time. I have had 3 transplants. So I've had a lot to overcome. I had to have a lot of resiliency. They had us advertise me to do a study on the impact of exercise and kidney disease. So that's when I met Dr. Headley. So we would do like a simulation of bench presses, simulation of curls, some leg exercises. We would stretch afterwards. And then I think I ended up doing a cool down on the treadmill. But just that slow, consistent part of exercising and maintaining, a consistent program really gave me a sense of strength, which oftentimes when you have a disease like kidney disease, you don't really realize the impact that it has on your body. It's like a slow deterioration, but that exercise, and with that helped me gain the strength back that I had lost. The students that I work with were really motivating and really had the opportunity to connect with me. It was something that I'd said, let me try, let me work out, but the energy level that I had was amazing. It was something that really gave me a light and hope during a time that wasn't so cheerful for me. And thank God, my transplant now, which is the 3rd one, I think I did my 10-year anniversary in February. I have a brother who had kidney disease as well. And I'm encouraging him to get in touch with Springfield College and Dr. Headley because the profound impact that it had on me, I want him to experience that same thing.
I'm sorry you didn't see it, but I can see it. I want to make a point here that when I saw him, he told me he had finished a doctorate. now enjoying life, influencing young people. So that was a thrill to me, to know that was the impact that it had on his life. I must say this to you, I was very upset with him. He said he had all this energy, but I was upset with him because, just get this up a minute here for a second, because he came to the college, he came to the college from around the corner, and basically what he had done, he came to the college from around the corner on a scooter. And I mean, he came on the scooter, then to be trained, and then to go back home. And I said, you're not going to do that. You're going to be too tired by the time you do that. So I think I took him home that day, but I was very upset with him because of that. I want to say thank you to Chris Evans and Damon, because they were the ones who filmed and interviewed. There's more to it than that. They've got a story. I think Damon has a story to develop from his story. And I just want to say thank you for that. Okay, so let's move on to in terms of pre-dialysis. Up until then, we were looking at people who were on dialysis, but then we changed to pre-dialysis. So pre-dialysis involves all these folks here, where their GFR is not normal, less than 60, but above 15. That's the group that we were working with for many years. Again, you can't see this very well, but one of the first questions that I was trying to look at was, can we stop people from going from stage 3 to stage 4 to stage 5? Progression, that's what we're trying to do, using lifestyle. I saw this study that was done by Idemar in Denmark, I believe it was, and along with this study, I saw some animal studies where there was some evidence to show that rats, the kidney model rats, that if you trained them, that kidney function did not get worse. So we were trying to test that hypothesis here at Springfield College. And we basically did a 48-week study. Basically, it's almost a year. Okay. Like Idemar, we found, and this may seem very simple, exercise doesn't do them any harm. Okay, it doesn't do any damage to the kidney. At one point, people thought it did, but we also confirmed that it didn't do that. But we also found that there was no evidence of progression. It didn't have any impact on progression. It didn't get worse, but it didn't get any better. However, we did get a publication from that, and this publication basically had an emphasis on the fact that there were some good changes in terms of the autonomic nervous system. So that was that. I went to a conference, and I think it was in San Diego or San Francisco, but at that conference, I learned something that has stood with me. I learned something I call kidney math. Okay? What I mean by that is 1 follows 2, or about 2 follows 1, and 3, and so on. In kidney disease, it doesn't work that way. You get to stage 3, and oftentimes people die prematurely. 3 doesn't mean you go to 4, 4 doesn't mean you go to 5. When you get a 5, the people at stage 5 are actually considered to be the survivors. You've gotten through all of that. Many people die prematurely. And the major cause of death is cardiovascular disease. I learned that. So I realized that I was asking the wrong question. I was looking at the wrong thing at that point in time. And therefore, I shifted the research focus to look at the impact of lifestyle interventions on cardiovascular disease. And one of the big things we looked at was something called arterial stiffness. Now, just to make it clear, kidney patients, over time, get vessels that become very stiff. As a result of that, that stiffness has an impact upon the work of the heart. All of this has an impact also upon their stroke risk and so on. So this is a big thing. Kidney patients die from cardiovascular disease, not kidney itself. It's cardiovascular disease. So we did a study, we proposed a study, again looking at moderate intensity exercise on stiffness in these patients. And this is just an overview of the study. They had 4 pre-test sessions. We were looking, this is where Dr. Evans came in. Because at one point, this was advertised, we got this grant, we needed some people, and she came by at some point, something in September or thereabouts, and I was not in my office. I got a little note on my desk, Sam, if you need any help, see me. I said, thank you very much. And then between September and January, I got 1 patient. 1 patient. So in January, I called Dr. Evans, can you come and help me? And Dr. Evans came and created a whole protocol of recruitment that has been very, very successful. So the bottom line is we got the numbers that we needed. Eventually we got a study that was published. We didn't see exactly everything we wanted. We didn't see any changes on stiffness, because stiffness, when we look back at it, probably took more, it's sort of the architecture of the wall, probably takes a long period of time. But what we did see was evidence of a reduction in something that's produced by the endothelium called endothelin. It's a vasoactive substance. We saw a reduction in that. So that was promising, and that was published because of that. So we saw a reduction in that particular thing. We then formed a collaboration with Vanderbilt University. This was our 01 grant, and we had a sort of piece of that here at the college. Eventually, I just wanted you to see, this is fun to look back at these pictures of the team. Professor Milch, Richard Wood, this is our team of people working together to make this grant happen. And it was very successful. I want to make a point. I think there were 90-something people who were collected from across 4 different sites. Springfield College had the largest number of recruits because of Dr. Evans. And that's the absolute truth. We got the largest number of people of all the 4 sites was at Springfield College. So these were 4 publications that came out of that work. Okay? And Springfield College is in all 4 of them. And again, we are still collaborating with them up to now. So that's the past. I've got a few more minutes to get on with what we're doing. We are looking now at the microbiota, and we're also looking at muscle function. We sort of full circle in the muscle function. This is what we know. CKD patients die prematurely from cardiovascular disease. Everybody needs to know that after leaving this lecture. The underlying cause is not the traditional risk factors. Blood pressure, cholesterol, it behaves differently in kidney disease. Patients, we know that people have high levels of inflammation and oxidative stress. I mean, a few years ago, so when I'm learning this, and this is the absolute truth, when I'm deep into this and I learn this, it goes into the classroom. And there are people who took med-phys, and they said, what you learn from Henley is inflammation and oxidative stress. That's what I would teach them. It's the truth. You know it's true. I will come back and say, all disease, inflammation, oxidative stress. Okay? So anyway, this is what we did. The underlying cause for this higher levels of inflammation could well be the gut. That's where we're looking at right now. That there is some evidence of what's called dysbiosis. And there's this relationship between the gut and the kidney that eventually, it is not a normal relationship, it's not a healthy relationship. It's a dysfunctional relationship. And eventually what happens is, this leads to cardiovascular disease. So, the microbiota in CKD, a normal healthy gut, I hope you can see some of this. First of all, you have good bacteria in a good symbiotic relationship with the host, with us. By the way, there are 100 trillion bugs basically in our gut, 100 trillion. Then you have a very sort of together epithelium. The gut lining, you can see here, that gut lining is very sort of shoulder to shoulder. Very little inflammation. There's stuff in here that should not be getting through, but it's not getting through. In CKD, it's different. In CKD, on the other hand, you have a bad bacteria outnumber the good bacteria, to make it very simple. Okay? You have a sort of disproportionate number of bad to good. Furthermore, look at the spacing between the epithelial cells. We now have gaps that have opened up, and things that normally are kept out are now able to seep through, and that triggers inflammation. That's the thinking behind this. And Dr. Vasari, whom I've never met, whom I collaborated with, he's in California. That's his model, and I've been following his particular model. So what we have been doing, and this happened during the pandemic, we took something called resistant starch, which is not digested in the same way. My dietitian is over here somewhere, right? It's not digested in the same way. What it does do, it gets into your colon, and the good microbes love it. They feed on it, and they reproduce, and so on. And eventually they produce what are called some short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyric. And that is thought to actually help these colonocytes, the epithelial cells. And that helps to bring about good health outcomes. So the whole idea is not probiotic, prebiotic. It's a starch, a resistant starch that the gut microbiota feed on and produce these substances here. So This was a study that we proposed. We got some funding from the Karpovich Award. We got some funding, and unfortunately, I would say this, but not to Coughlin being here. There was in 2020, we were called in a march into the auditorium, and basically we were told we were shutting down, and I was in the back fuming, because I knew, not at you, but that was the end of our exercise study. And we were doing something that nobody else had done or was doing. So we were ahead of the game at that time, okay? But nonetheless, I want to say this quite honestly, thank you to the administrators who, during the pandemic, gave us permission to continue to recruit. I want to say thank you, because we did continue to recruit. As a result of that, at the end of it, took a long time, but this is like a new stuff for us, okay? What we found was that diversity of the gut microbiome changed as a result of people taking the actual prebiotic. We also found, there's another story behind this, I don't have the time to go into it right now. We found a significant reduction in something called PCS. That was one of the toxins, a uric toxin that is dangerous to the system. We found a reduction in those levels. Now this is it. So these are the conclusions. 16 weeks of resistance, the starch, basically helped these people. There was a decrease in the diversity. There was an increase in good bugs, as it were, good microbes that were able to actually produce the short-chain fatty acids and so on. So these were good outcomes. They are preliminary outcomes. We are using them. There's a grant that we've proposed right now that we've used these data to help us with. Now, this is where I was really upset. We had 21 people randomized at that time when we had to stop. And we had like only 5 people in this group, but we saw some interesting findings. We saw that there was a hint that when you combined exercise with the prebiotic, that we actually saw a large effect. But because of only 21 people, that's all we had. Okay? So that was unfortunate. Let me just transition to the last section here about muscle. Again, we did a study recently, this is current, where we looked at CK, we looked at normals, we looked at stage 3, and stage 4, and stage 5. We took 10 people in each of those groups. The bottom line was that we found, obviously, as you go from one stage down to the lower stage, things got worse. That's basically what we expected to see. And we did functional testing, we found that they got worse. We saw an increase in toxins and markers of inflammation. That is still being we're still analyzing that data. That's to be written up and so on. So, we are now planning some studies I'm going to finish in the next few minutes. These are the studies we're planning. This is actually currently under review at the NIH, where we took that preliminary data, and we are asking the question, does exercise training have an additive effect when you add it to a supplement? Does it work together? So we're getting back to the exercise with the supplement to see if you add exercise with the supplement, if it actually has a beneficial effect. It's a small R01 that we're waiting on right now. We've seen this, as people's kidneys get worse, these toxins levels go up. If you're not getting rid of it, they sort of back up into the system and they do some damage. This is a theory that we're working on right now, and reading the literature rather, shows that when the kidney function goes down, this toxin goes up. It actually has a negative impact upon the mitochondria. We are now zooming in on the mitochondria because it's dysfunctional in CKD. So this is what we're actually looking at. So the mitochondria is dysfunctional. There's an increase in inflammatory markers and all the rest of it, but that's the model that we're looking at right now. And the study that I am actually now putting together with help from another physician, can a reduction in uric toxins lead to an improvement in mitochondrial function and an improvement in skeletal muscle function? We have preliminary data that we plan to use to write this grant up. So I want to say thank you for your attendance, but I'm not finished yet. I would just like to finish on this, to say this, that look at these 2 men. This is Dr. Karpovich, and if you don't know, this other gentleman here is Dr. Naismith. What an impact these 2 men have had on our society, right? Think about the impact that Dr. Karpovich has had on the fields that we hold dear here at Springfield College. Therefore, I would like to make a suggestion. I think that we need to honor Dr. Karpovich even more. And this is a suggestion. It would be fitting to me if we were to rename the Human Performance Lab the Peter Karpovich or the Karpovich Lab. I was thinking about this recently as well. I was in England doing my master's degree. I was in London at a place called University College London. And there was a place in that called the Starling Lab. Everybody knows physiology knows that. The Starling Lab. There was a lab named after Starling. I think that it would be fitting at Springfield College to have a lab named after Dr. Karpovich. Thank you. Now, my rationale for saying that is this. Exercise science, strength and conditioning, sports science, which we are pivoting to, all of those, PT, athletic training, all of them have a basis in sports psychology. I was trained, but all had a basis from what Dr. Karpovich did here at Springfield College. And I really feel, honestly, and I did I came to this as I read the literature. I read this stuff and I said, wait a minute, this gentleman has done so much at this college. And for the field, not just here at Springfield College, that it would be fitting to name our lab in honor of Dr. Karpovich. Thank you very much.